Last night, I went and watched the new Godzilla Minus One movie, and I had heard people saying how good it was in whispers. They were giving it the old reach around, saying how amazing this movie was, just, glazing it. And I went into it lowering my expectations because I didn't want to pump it up too much and then be disappointed. But I gotta say, I don't think my expectations could have been high enough to be disappointed by this movie. It was genuinely amazing. Easily one of the best movies of this year, probably the best movie of this year, and just straight up one of the greatest films I've ever seen. It does everything that the previous Godzilla movies done good, but then expands upon it and somehow does it even better while implementing new elements that just take the story to another level. All on a $15 million budget. The budget for this movie was $15 million. And it's far, leagues better than the Godzilla 2014 movie that was a Hollywood movie made for $160 million. Even Godzilla vs. Kong for a very similar budget. These upwards of $200 million movies have nothing on this Japanese-made $15 million Godzilla movie. And I'm going to be getting into spoilers in this video. If you haven't seen this yet, I highly recommend you go watch it. I actually can't recommend it enough. If there's any movie that I would say you should watch from this year, it's Godzilla Minus One. It is, God, it's fucking amazing. Never did I think I would go into a Godzilla movie and tear up. This movie, Godzilla Minus One, had me getting emotional. That's how good of a story this thing has. I was enjoying the parts of the movie that had the human characters interacting more than I was when Godzilla was on the screen destroying everything and wreaking havoc. Like, that doesn't happen in monster movies. In those kind of movies, you're just suffering through the human parts, typically, because they're so unbearable, they're not lockable, relatable, or anything, and you're just waiting for the monster to pop up. That's the whole reason you went to the movie, was to see Godzilla. But in this movie, I was enjoying the human story more than I was Godzilla's story, which I never thought that would happen, ever. Which that only made the parts where Godzilla actually did show up far more impactful, because there are genuine consequences as to what he's doing. And they're not doing that fucking anti-hero thing where Godzilla's on the human side. He's literally, in this movie, what Godzilla is supposed to be, what he was made to be. He was made right after the World War II, the bombings of Japan and all, or the nukings of Japan and all that. Just like the absolute tragedy that befell upon the world after World War II. Godzilla came right after all of that, as like a representation of all the disaster and the wreckage that Japan faced. And then Hollywood tried to turn him into this weird anti-hero that's now going to be teaming up with Kong in this new movie coming out. And that's just weird. It's strange. Godzilla isn't supposed to be relatable. You're not supposed to feel for Godzilla. He is a monster who just does nothing but evil things, like wrecking entire cities, just devastating people's families, killing people for no reason besides him just being an absolute freak of nature. And this movie, Godzilla Minus One, displays that masterfully. It starts off the movie, and it takes place right at the tail end of World War II at the late 1940s, and we follow our main character, Shikishima. He was a kamikaze pilot in World War II, but obviously a failed one because he's still alive in this movie, which in Japan culture brings immense shame upon him because he didn't do the only thing he was meant to do. He didn't go out with honor. So this whole time we're following him and his little journey, his war, until his war is finally over. And honestly, the way they set up the whole battle between Shikishima and Godzilla is awesome. Like, how exactly would you go about creating a beef between a human and a Godzilla? But this movie somehow does it in a way that makes perfect sense, because we find out that he landed on this mechanic repair shop island that was, made to repair kamikaze planes. He was acting like his plane was, needed repair, but it really didn't. He was just scared and he didn't want to go through with his mission. So he stopped there, and then Godzilla emerged on this island and started stomping on everybody. And the way they shoot Godzilla also is masterful. Really just puts in perspective how scary and just how hopeless everyone and everything is when Godzilla comes out to play. Like, there's really nothing you can do. He comes out on this island, Odo Island, I believe is what it's called, and he starts stomping on everybody. He even, like, fucking bots people, like, personally attacks them, just chomps them, picks them up like a T-Rex and flings them. And he pretty much massacres everybody on this island except for Shikishima and one other mechanic that I can't remember the name of right now. Tachibana. His name's Tachibana. And then after that event happens on that island, Tachibana forever pretty much hates Shikishima. He blames Shikishima for everything that happened. He says if he would have shot the gun on the plane instead of freezing up when Godzilla was in front of him, none of the people would have had to have died. But as we soon find out, it wouldn't have made a difference. Nothing can kill Godzilla. He has this freakish Deadpool regeneration kind of thing going on to where he pretty much can't fucking die. Even at the end of the movie, I'll get to that later, but it's just, he's got some, he's an unstoppable force of nature. That's what Godzilla is. That's what he's meant to be, and this movie does it great. It really makes you feel like everyone's helpless and there's really nothing they can do against Godzilla, but they do their best regardless. The way they handled Godzilla in this movie was actually just perfect. They took him back to his roots of him being like a metaphor for post-war grief and anxiety and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a very refreshing take after seeing the Hollywood bullshit that they're doing with Godzilla right now, with him and Kong creating this like almost superhero cinematic universe type of thing, because everything has to be connected, everything has to be a universe at this point. All of that is nothing compared to how great this Godzilla movie is. But anyways, that's the event that starts Shikishima's little redemption arc, him trying to find his purpose for living on when he wasn't supposed to. He ends up meeting this girl named Noriko. She's like a thief and runs into him on this island once he goes back to his home island. And she ends up kind of just forcing herself into his home with a child that isn't hers, but they end up raising her together, and then they form this little bond. They're not like in a relationship, but they're living together, helping raise the little child Akiko. And it's wholesome. It's just very good storytelling. Like I said, the human characters in this movie, it's not something you would expect in a monster film, but they have some of the best human characters I've seen in really any movie in quite some time. Like, honestly, I was getting lost in the human interactions and the characters interacting that I forgot it was a Godzilla movie until he popped up and started destroying cities once again. And also, I believe in one of the times, like it's maybe one of his first appearances where he comes out on mainland and starts like stomping through the town, that they play I believe it's the original Godzilla theme, or at least it sounds like the original Godzilla theme. And it's honestly, it gave me chills, because it's like what you imagine from Godzilla from those old movies, but done in this new movie as a great callback to it. And also the way they deal with Godzilla in this movie is very impactful. It makes everything much more meaningful, because he's not on the screen the entire movie. It's not just like Godzilla walking around the whole time fighting and breaking and destroying stuff. They use him sparingly, but he has a lot of screen time, but they make it to where his screen time actually means something, and it's not just meaningless time of having Godzilla on the screen because it's a Godzilla movie. Every single second of this film has a purpose and a meaning, and it all connects together in this beautiful story that I cannot recommend. That you need to watch this movie. I can't recommend it enough. You have to see this movie. But anyways, the good chunk of the beginning of the film is obviously introducing the characters, making you care for the characters, because it's very well developed characters. And then Shikishima gets a job working on this boat that searches for landmines that were left over from the war, which is where we get introduced to the three other somewhat main characters, the three friends of the main character, which they're called the Kid, the Doc, and the Captain. And they end up forming this little ragtag crew, which kind of for some reason reminded me of like the Straw Hat crew, with just a bunch of goofballs on board, all of them having different personalities, just very polarizing personalities, all working together to do this job to wipe out the landmines from the ocean that were left over, and then they get paid for it. But it's when they're doing this job that Shikishima has his second encounter with Godzilla. After Godzilla's all grown up, he's a big boy now, and also has the ability to shoot fucking nuclear lasers out of his mouth, which, giant reptilian lizard that can't be stopped. added in with nuclear blast out of his mouth, and also I think the nuclear blast is what gave him the healing abilities. Yeah, he's really overpowered now. But they have this encounter with him out there, which kind of sets up Shikishima's redemption arc, where he finds out that his purpose is to take down Godzilla. He needs to get revenge so his war can finally be over. And me rambling about this cannot begin to actually portray how well this movie's laid out, from the characters to the Godzilla moments and all that stuff. But I really just wanted to ramble about this because it's very rare that I see a movie that makes me want to talk about it like this. Like, I don't really do movie reviews unless it's a really bad movie, like the Grinch movie or the Winnie the Pooh movie. But this is just such a good movie that I have to talk about it. Takashi Yamazaki, you made a masterpiece. As Eric Cartman would say, if I knew where Takashi Yamazaki was, I would be on the floor sucking his balls right now. But while I'm talking about Yamazaki, I wanted to show you this clip from him about how he went about showing Godzilla on screen.
ゴジラを近くしたいっていうのはすごくあって、人が体感する距離感っていうのは、おそらくすぐそこにゴジラがいたのが絶対怖いと思ったんで、足だったり顔だったりすごく近くにゴジラがいるってことをすごい大事にして。
So he said he made it a point to show Godzilla up close, and I think that works perfect because you really aren't used to the angles that you see Godzilla in this movie, and it, in my opinion, makes it a better viewing experience because you actually feel like you're a bystander, like a civilian looking on at this monstrosity that's unstoppable that everyone's calling Gojira. It just puts in perspective the helplessness of the humans, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. But also the cast, you know, I gotta give a shout out to them. Every single actor in this movie played their role perfectly. Like, the acting in this movie is amazing, you know? It's nothing short of spectacular. And I know this is all over the place, but I didn't feel like writing things down. I just wanted it to be a genuine review of the movie, of my thoughts and opinions about this thing. But to hop back into the story, after we get introduced to all our characters, we're well familiar with them at this point. It leads up to the big climax of the story, which is them hatching this big elaborate scheme to take out Godzilla. But right before the big climax, there is like the heating up point, I guess you could call it, where Shikishima and Norika are in, I forget the name of the town, but they're in the town that she is working in because she got a job there. She travels there. It's like a little bit away from where they live, and they hear of Godzilla making his appearance in that town, or the city, and he's absolutely wreaking havoc to it right after they just rebuilt everything from the war. Godzilla is now tearing everything down once again, and he's just killing everybody. And in the ensuing panic, sorry, now that I can breathe again. In the ensuing panic of everyone trying to run away from Godzilla, Shikishima finds Noriko, but while they're running away, Godzilla launches up one of his nuclear blast laser beam attacks out of his mouth. He shoots it out, and the shockwave from it, of him shooting it in like the opposite direction, obliterates everyone. It sends everyone flying, and right before it gets to the two main characters, Noriko pushes Shikishima out of the way into an alley to where he would be safe. And at the time, I thought it was a stupid cliche that they did that. Up until that point, everything was perfect, and I was like, damn, why'd they have to do that cliche of her pushing him out of the way? She could have easily just tackled him into the alley, and they both would have been safe. But then at the same time, there was this whole theme going on with her, about him having to live on and finish his war and all that. And you know, at the time, it's very heavily implied that she's fucking dead because she got sent flying very, very hard, very far away. He couldn't find her afterwards, and it's very heavily implied that she's dead, like I said. So then that leads us to Shikishima even more so wanting revenge on Godzilla at this point. So he gets in contact with the mechanic that was the only one that survived the initial island attack with him. They end up repairing this plane, and he's going to be flying this plane as part of the big final battle, the final showdown with Godzilla to take him out once and for all. So they all the characters, the main characters, and even a bunch of side characters formulate this plan that they think is going to take out Godzilla. They're going to try to sink him to the bottom of the ocean and then rise him back up and let the pressure of the ocean be what takes him out. So, you know, skipping a bit of the plot points here, they do that. It doesn't end up working. He's still alive. They end up pulling him back up to the surface. And then now it's time for Shikishima to shine. It's time for him to actually get revenge. So now we're at the point of the movie that it's built up to this entire time. Shikishima's been living with this survivor's guilt. He says his war is not over yet, and it's all implied that he's about to actually kamikaze into Godzilla's mouth, explode the plane that has some bombs in it, and take out Godzilla and himself in a blaze of redeeming glory. But as he flies the plane into his mouth, we realize that him and the mechanic, they made up. The mechanic wanted him to live, and there was an ejector seat in this plane, to which he ejected at the last second, and then the plane exploded in Godzilla's mouth, leading Godzilla to sink to the bottom of the ocean, implying that Godzilla was defeated once and for all. So they're all celebrating, they're going, woohoo, Shikishima's not dead, his war is finally over, he can finally sleep without having nightmares of all the people that he feels like he was responsible for getting killed with his survivor's guilt. And then while they're having this big hurrah after they defeat Godzilla, the lady that's like their neighbor that he knew before the war, that's the aunt to the kid that they fostered, she's like one of the somewhat important side characters. She comes and hands him a note. And at this point in the theater, I was like, there's no way that's it. There's absolutely no way that they're going to say that Noriko is actually alive. And lo and behold, that's what it was. She actually survived the blast, the shockwave of Godzilla's attack. And she was in the hospital with a bandage covering her eye, her arm, and a cast. She was in pretty bad shape, but she was alive. And then he goes to the hospital to see her. He breaks down and cries and hugs her while he has Akiko with him. And it's this big happily ever after moment where they're all back together in their happy little family. And presumably he actually is going to marry her now, because he didn't before. He said his war wasn't over yet, so he couldn't bring her into it. And it also does this thing where it zooms into Noriko's neck at the end of their reunion there, which is also the end of the movie. And it shows this like black mark, which it kind of seems like maybe is implying that when she got hit with Godzilla's attack and the radiation from Godzilla, that she gained potentially gained the regeneration ability that Godzilla has, which would explain how she survived that initial impact that should have killed her. And it could be setting up for something to happen in like a sequel to this movie, because like a post-credit scene, well, it's not really a post-credit scene. It's like it's the end of the movie, the main end of the movie. It shows Godzilla at the bottom of the ocean after he sunk down when they blew him up. And he's slowly regenerating, and like his eyeball opens, I believe it was, but he's regenerating once again like he did before when they blew up his head, showing that Godzilla's just not actually stoppable. Which I'm not even really going to complain about that, because I would love to see a sequel to this, especially under the same studio, the Toho studio, same director. I would absolutely love to see a sequel to this Godzilla movie. So everything that you've seen about this movie, about it being great, about it being impactful, it's all right. Every bit of hype of this movie is worth it. Every bit of glazing that this movie gets, it deserves it. It's nothing short of the perfect Godzilla film, and honestly, just the perfect film in general. I would easily give this a 9.5 out of 10. And I would 100% want to watch it again. But other than that, I will catch you in the next one.